I thought it would be interesting to highlight some of the comments from r/anime for this week's episode of Attack on Titans. Before we get to the comments, this was a chart of the ratings the user gave this episode. As you can see, an overwhelming majority said the episode was excellent, and I would have to agree. The art quality, the storyline, the pacing, all of them were excellent. Now, continuing to the comments could be broken down into about 4 categories. It was about the destruction of the rumbling, about Flock and Jean, and finally about Mikasa and Armin. We'll begin with this comment just because it captures the craziness of this episode. The episode was yet another piece of amazing writing. Right after shit hit the fan, we got a relatively calm episode that uses its time to pick up the pieces and get us oriented with each key character and how they've impacted by the rumbling. Even though it's literally the apocalypse, anything can happen because our boys are still fighting and kicking. That was one of the key highlights of the episode. Our main cast is kind of all spread out, and it was nice to see how each of them have their own motivations and how each of them behaved. The rumbling shots are absolutely gorgeous, and people are dying of it, of course. This is an interesting comment because from Eren's perspective, the people of parody were supposed to be the safe ones, yet we see the destruction. Oni Cyborg says, the eligibility criteria for being safe from Eren's rumbling scheme was that you had to 1. Be an alien, 2. Be an alien inside the walls only, 3. Be an alien inside walls and away from the walls. Oni Cyborg asks what are next, and yeah, what's next is you also had to listen to Flock. You couldn't be a traitor from his perspective or he'd kill you. And it kind of puts into highlight the question, who watches the watchmen? There are guards, right? The guards are supposed to guard someone, but who makes sure the guards are behaving appropriately? And we can see this through Flock, right? So who's supposed to watch Flock? Flock isn't behaving admirably. Lonely Ass Guardian says, it's so cool to not only see the immense scale of such an apocalyptic event, but also how the chaos and destruction it causes on a ground level. Even if Eren wants to protect Paradise, just activating the rumble itself decimates so much of their land, their forests and homes, and kills so many of his own people just for the whole thing to be able to leave the island. Plus, something just feels even more hopeless now when almost every scene surrounding the central characters has that insane visual of the Titans moving without pause in the background. Really gives you a sense of how every second they waste pulling themselves back together, the world outside exists on a ticking clock. And the final comment on the rumbling. Once again, we get an example of people trying to cope with meaningless death by calling it a sacrifice. It's particularly sad, terrifying, when they're calling another person's loss a sacrifice. So we see this with the townspeople. They've lost people they know, yet they still support Eren because, the means justify the ends. So whatever needs to happen happens as long as the end result is good for them, which is exactly what Marley is doing, right? They wanted to get rid of Parody because Parody could unleash the Titans on the world. So from Marley's perspective, it doesn't matter, that they kicked the wall 4 years ago and all these people died, as long as the end result is justified. The next group of comments were mostly with Flock. Flock is a very decisive character. Mazin141 says, they definitely have a thing for Flock, considering they always give him the best faces. So this is a kind of a running meme in the AOT community where they think that Flock has the most expressive faces, so the manga artist must really like him. Non-Royal says, I think Flock almost broke Jean. So he's referring to this scene, and it's kind of interesting. Jean's kind of reverted back to season 1, where he was with Marco and just unsure of himself, not really knowing what to do. This would be kind of a good, time for him to rise up and become the leader Marco wanted him to. Rydred says, Flock is goated, best character after Mr. Genocide. That was a little funny. Of course, Mr. Genocide being Eren. And then I Don't Care 29, exact opposite. Yet again, AOT finds new ways to make me hate Flock. So, again, very divisive character. In which case, the divisiveness being a signal that, he's a very well-written character. Non-mathematic Titian679, Flock redefines terrorism. This comment was interesting because, I mean, what it shows is even with Marley and the rest of the world gone, parody isn't going to be like peaceful, right? We see the infighting. Flock is a perfect example of how you can never really stop this struggle. Eren thinks you wipe out the rest of the world and everything will be fine. But yeah, we see right here, no, it won't. You know, for Eren to achieve his true freedom, I mean, he would really have to kill everyone, honestly. And then it's like, you're free, but at what cost? Tricky AD 5678. It's been 8 long years. Welcome back, Annie. In the show's time, Annie's been trapped for 4 years, but in the real world, it's taken 8 years to get to this point. Rogue says, loved Hitch and Annie's discourse this episode. I had almost forgotten that those two were kind of friends back in season 1. We got Annie's backstory this episode as well. I was suspecting that man not to be her real father. The difference in how they look was too much. This was interesting. So the little we saw of Annie, we thought that, you know, that was actually her father, and the relationship between her and her father were more straightforward. But yeah, the flashback reveals it was very complex. So this comment by Japan Phoenix, I thought it was funny. Annie, call an ambulance. Hitch, but not for me. Annie, wait, what?
まずその浮気を脱いで。力弱すぎておばあちゃんかと思ったわ。
Modology, Armin inherited both Berthold's Titan and his crush. Meanwhile, Marlo will never see the current Hitch. The final group of comments were about Armin and Mikasa. Well, there it is. After trying to deny everything for so long and thinking that Eren was still on their side, Armin has finally snapped. Everything is shit, and there's no real game plan for him or anybody else, especially for poor Mikasa, who's just completely lost. The division between Eren and Armin, you know, was set up a few episodes back. I think it was basically the time that they had to go and rescue Eren. From that point, you could see the split between, you know, when Armin mentions that if they need to take him out, you know, they have the serum and they can give the Titan to someone more trustful. So it starts there, but Armin still always holds out hope. But it seems like he's kind of at the breaking point. I'll tell Connie to just let his mom lie on his back as a Titan. Again, another comment that highlights how Armin really hasn't thought it through to the extent that he should. Because you know Connie's just not going to give him back that easy. Armin looks listless. He is right, Erwin would have handled the situation better. He has to pull up his socks and do better. Mikasa is just a shell of a person now. I hope she gets the strength to move on. Again, this is an interesting comment because, you know, Armin, Jean, and Mikasa, they really have no leadership. Mikasa doesn't want to go against Eren, and even if she could, same thing with Armin and Jean. They're completely lost, and it seems like they've given up and they've just accepted that this has happened and there's nothing they can do about it. Top room 7971. Damn, poor Mikasa. That must have been one of the saddest stories I've ever heard. So Mikasa has really just been taking L's the entire season, part 1 also included. And I hope before Attack on Titan ends, she gets, you know, a dedicated time to get her stuff resolved, especially since she's been an integral part from like season 1. The final comment by Sneaky Swirl. The amount of different groups and places the characters split into are so diverse. I didn't bother counting, but so many things are happening at once. So fun. And I couldn't agree more.